Professor Elena Martinez stood at the front of her classroom, watching the late afternoon sun paint golden stripes across the polished grand piano. 15 years. That's how long she'd been teaching music theory at Berkshire Arts Academy, and, in those 15 years, she'd developed a sixth sense about students. She could tell within the first week who had real talent and who was just going through the motions. Today was the third week of the fall semester, and her advanced piano class was already settling into a rhythm. 22 students, most of them serious about music, a few just there because they needed the credits. Elena knew them all by now. The overconfident tenor who thought he was the next Broadway star, the shy violinist who barely spoke but played like an angel, the jazz enthusiast who questioned every classical piece she introduced. Then the door opened. A young woman walked in looking completely out of place. She was maybe 19, wearing jeans and a faded hoodie, carrying a backpack that had seen better days. But that wasn't what caught Elena's attention. It was what was on the backpack, mathematical equations. Lots of them. Written in permanent marker, covering every inch of fabric like someone had used it as a notebook. The girl also clutched a scientific calculator in one hand and a water bottle in the other. No sheet music. No instrument case. Nothing that suggested she belonged in an advanced piano class. Elena glanced at her attendance sheet. Right. The late transfer student, Maya Chen. The registrar had mentioned her last week, something about special circumstances and paperwork delays. Elena had been too busy preparing for midterms to pay much attention. "You must be Maya," Elena said, trying to sound welcoming. "Find a seat anywhere. We're just about to start today's lesson." Maya nodded quickly, almost nervously, and slipped into a chair in the back row. She set the calculator on the desk in front of her, and Elena couldn't help but notice her hands were shaking slightly. The other students barely glanced at the newcomer. They were used to people dropping in and out during the first few weeks. Elena turned her attention back to the class, pushing her curiosity about Maya aside for now. "All right, everyone. Today we're going to talk about one of Chopin's most challenging pieces, the Ballade No. 1 in G minor. Can anyone tell me what makes this piece particularly difficult?" A few hands went up. Elena called on the jazz enthusiast who launched into an explanation about the tempo changes and technical demands. It was a decent answer, the kind she expected from advanced students. "Good," Elena said. "Now instead of just talking about it, let me show you." She moved to the piano, settling onto the bench with the ease of decades of practice. Her fingers found the keys and she began to play. The opening notes of the ballade filled the classroom, soft and haunting at first, then building in complexity. But here's where Elena did something she did with every new piece every semester, without fail. It was her secret teaching technique, one she'd learned from her own professor years ago. As she played through the first movement, she deliberately hit wrong notes. Not obviously wrong, not enough to make it sound terrible, but wrong enough that anyone with a trained ear should notice. 3 notes in the first section, 2 in the second. Small mistakes, carefully placed. Most students never caught them. They were too busy being impressed by the overall performance, too focused on the parts she played correctly. Only the truly gifted ones, the ones with exceptional musical ears, noticed something was off. Elena finished the piece and lifted her hands from the keys. She turned to face the class, ready to ask her usual question. Did anyone notice anything unusual about that performance? But before she could even open her mouth, a hand shot up in the back row. Maya's hand. Elena blinked in surprise. In 15 years of using this technique, only a handful of students had ever noticed on the first try, and they certainly never raised their hands this quickly, this eagerly. "Yes, Maya?" Elena said, genuinely curious now. Maya stood up, and Elena noticed she was gripping her calculator like a lifeline. Her voice was quiet but clear. "You played 5 wrong notes. The first one was in measure 12, where you hit a B flat instead of a B natural. The second was in measure 18, an F sharp instead of an F natural. The third, wait," Elena interrupted, holding up a hand. She felt a chill run down her spine. This girl had not only noticed the wrong notes but was listing them with perfect accuracy. You caught all of them? Yes, Maya said simply, but that's not the interesting part. Not the interesting part? Elena almost laughed. Catching all 5 deliberately wrong notes on a first hearing was extraordinary. What could possibly be more interesting than that? Go on, Elena said, leaning back against the piano. Maya took a breath, and suddenly words started tumbling out of her mouth like water from a broken dam. Chopin structured this piece using specific harmonic ratios. The frequency relationship between the notes follows a mathematical pattern based on the circle of fifths. When you played the wrong notes, you disrupted the harmonic series. The B-flat in measure 12 created a tritone interval that shouldn't exist in that context. It broke the mathematical progression by introducing a frequency ratio of approximately 1.414 instead of the expected 1.498. And the F-sharp in measure 18, that created an augmented fourth when the piece requires a perfect fourth, which changes the ratio from 4/3 to 45/32, and that completely throws off the... Okay, Elena said, holding up both hands now. Her mind was reeling. Let me make sure I understand this. You're analyzing Chopin using mathematical frequency ratios? Well, yes, Maya said, looking confused, as if this was the most obvious thing in the world. All music is mathematics. Every note has a specific frequency measured in hertz. The relationship between frequencies creates intervals, and those intervals follow mathematical ratios. Chopin was basically composing with numbers, whether he realized it or not. A perfect fifth is always a 3:2 ratio, an octave is always 2:1, and when you understand these ratios you can predict how the piece should flow. Your wrong notes disrupted the expected mathematical pattern. The classroom had gone completely silent. Every student was staring at Maya now, some with confusion, others with something that looked like awe. The jazz enthusiast had his mouth hanging open. Elena felt like she'd just discovered a new species of musician, or maybe mathematician. She wasn't entirely sure which. Maya, Elena said slowly, can I ask what your background is? Have you studied music theory before? Not formally, Maya said, sitting back down and hugging her calculator. I've been teaching myself piano for about a year, mostly from videos and books. But I've always been better with numbers than people, so I just approached music the way I approach everything else, through mathematics. Better with numbers than people. There was a story there, Elena could sense it. But before she could ask another question, the bell rang, signaling the end of class. Students began packing up their bags, chattering among themselves about the weird new girl who talked about music like it was a physics equation. As the classroom emptied, Elena watched Maya gather her things. The girl moved carefully, methodically, like someone who'd learned to be cautious in a world that moved too fast for her. Maya, Elena called out before she could leave. Could you stay for just a moment? Maya froze, then turned around, her eyes wide with worry. Did I do something wrong? I'm sorry if I interrupted your lesson. I just thought you wanted us to identify the mistakes, and I have a hard time not saying things when I notice patterns and... You didn't do anything wrong, Elena assured her quickly. I just want to understand you better. You're clearly brilliant, but you're also clearly different from any student I've ever taught, and I need to figure out the best way to help you learn. Maya's shoulders relaxed slightly. I know I'm weird. People tell me that a lot. Not weird, Elena corrected gently. Unique. There's a difference. As Maya finally left the classroom, Elena sat down at her desk, her mind spinning with questions. Who was this girl who saw music as mathematics? Where had she come from? And more importantly, how was Elena supposed to teach someone who already understood music theory better than most of her colleagues, but approached it from an angle Elena had never even considered? She had a feeling this was going to be a very interesting semester. Elena couldn't stop thinking about Maya Chen. That night, after all her classes ended, she sat in her office staring at the computer screen. The registrar's office had sent over Maya's transfer paperwork, but it was surprisingly thin. Just the basics. Name, age, previous school. Nothing that explained why a 19-year-old with a calculator obsession had suddenly appeared in an advanced piano class 3 weeks into the semester. Previous institution, Massachusetts Institute of Technology. Elena sat up straighter. MIT. That was one of the most prestigious technical universities in the world. What was an MIT student doing transferring to a small arts academy in the middle of nowhere? She reached for her phone and called down to the registrar's office. Patricia answered on the third ring, sounding tired. It was almost 6 in the evening and most of the administrative staff had gone home. Patricia, it's Elena Martinez. I have a question about one of my new students, Maya Chen. Her file says she transferred from MIT, but there's not much detail here. There was a pause on the other end. Oh, Maya. Yes, that was a special case. Her previous advisor called me personally to arrange the transfer. Very unusual situation. Can you tell me anything about it? Elena asked, trying not to sound too eager. Not much. Privacy rules, you know. But I can tell you she was some kind of mathematics prodigy. Full scholarship to MIT at 16 years old. 16, Elena. Can you imagine? Elena felt her stomach drop. 16. That meant Maya had been accepted to one of the hardest universities in the world, while most kids her age were just getting their driver's licenses. So why did she leave? Elena pressed. Patricia's voice lowered. I probably shouldn't say this, but the advisor mentioned something about medical leave. Health reasons. That's all I know. The family wanted a fresh start somewhere quieter, less pressure. They specifically requested our music program. After hanging up, Elena sat in the growing darkness of her office, watching the last rays of sunlight fade from the windows. A mathematics prodigy who left MIT for health reasons and ended up in a music class. The pieces weren't quite fitting together yet, but Elena was starting to see the outline of a picture. The next morning, Elena did something she rarely did. She reached out to Maya's previous instructors, not to pry into her medical history, but to understand how to teach her better. That's what she told herself anyway. Professor Robert Chen, the music appreciation instructor Maya had taken during her first semester, responded to Elena's email within an hour. They met for coffee in the faculty lounge that afternoon. Is brilliant, Robert said, stirring sugar into his coffee, but she's also fragile. I don't mean that in a condescending way. I mean she's like a piece of crystal, absolutely beautiful and clear, but you get the sense that too much pressure, and she might shatter. What happened at MIT? Elena asked directly. Robert hesitated, then sighed. I don't know all the details. Her parents told me some of it when they enrolled her here. Maya wasn't just good at mathematics. She was extraordinary. National competitions, published papers, the works. She was being fast-tracked through a PhD program. Can you imagine that kind of pressure? Being surrounded by people twice your age, expected to perform at genius level every single day? Elena couldn't imagine it. She'd been a good student herself, but never exceptional. Never the kind of talent that drew that kind of attention. She had a breakdown. Robert continued quietly. Anxiety, panic attacks, the whole thing. It got so bad she couldn't even walk into a classroom without having a panic attack. She withdrew in the middle of her 3rd year. Spent almost a year just recovering. And music? Elena asked. How did she end up here? Her therapist suggested it. Said Maya needed something that would engage her mind but without all the pressure and competition. Maya started teaching herself piano at home just from videos and books. Her parents said it was the first time in months they'd seen her smile. So when she was ready to try school again, they looked for music programs. Somewhere small, somewhere quiet, somewhere she wouldn't feel like she was being judged against impossible standards. Elena felt a weight settle in her chest. Suddenly, Maya's nervous hands, her careful movements, her reluctance to speak up, it all made sense. This wasn't just a quirky math girl who happened to like music. This was someone trying to rebuild herself from pieces. She's in my advanced piano class, Elena said. And Robert, she's incredible, not just technically. She understands music in a way I've never seen before. She analyzes everything through mathematics, through patterns and ratios and frequencies. Robert smiled sadly. That's how her brain works. She can't turn it off. At MIT, that was encouraged, rewarded. But after the breakdown, her therapist warned that she needs to learn to experience things without analyzing them to death. Music was supposed to help with that. But she's still analyzing everything, Elena said. I know, that's the problem, isn't it? She can't help herself. Her mind just works that way. Over the next few days, Elena watched Maya more carefully in class. She saw things she'd missed before. The way Maya's hands shook slightly whenever Elena called on her. The way she counted on her fingers during rhythm exercises, turning the beats into mathematical sequences. The way she sat alone during breaks while other students chatted and laughed together. One afternoon, Elena asked Maya to stay after class again. This time, Maya didn't look worried, just tired. I wanted to talk to you about your approach to music, Elena began carefully. I know it's wrong, Maya said immediately, staring at her hands. My last instructor told me I need to feel the music, not calculate it, but I don't know how to do that. Numbers make sense. Numbers don't lie or change or confuse me. When I look at a piece of music, I see patterns and sequences and ratios. That's just how my brain works. Elena leaned forward. Maya, I'm not saying it's wrong. I'm saying it's different. And I'm trying to figure out how to teach you in a way that honors how you think while also helping you grow. Maya looked up, and Elena was startled to see tears in her eyes. Everyone keeps trying to fix me, Maya said quietly. At MIT, they wanted me to be smarter, faster, better, to publish more papers, win more awards, prove I deserve to be there. And now everyone wants me to be less analytical, more emotional, more normal. I just want to be allowed to exist the way I am. The words hit Elena like a punch. She thought about her own failures, her own journey to this small teaching job. She'd wanted to be a concert pianist once, had dreamed of performing in great halls, of making people weep with her playing. But she'd been too focused on perfection, too mechanical in her approach. She'd played every note correctly but never touched anyone's heart. Her professors had tried to fix her too. And when they couldn't, when she couldn't find that spark of emotion they insisted she needed, she'd given up performing altogether. Was she about to do the same thing to Maya? What if I told you, Elena said slowly, that I don't want to fix you? What if I told you that I think your mathematical approach to music is actually a gift, not a problem? Maya blinked. But everyone says a lot of things, Elena interrupted. But here's what I think. I think you understand the architecture of music better than anyone I've ever met. You can see the bones, the structure, the logic behind every composition. That's rare. That's valuable. But, Maya said, because she could hear the word coming. But music is more than architecture. It's more than getting the ratios right. And I think somewhere inside you, you know that. Otherwise, why would you be here? Why not just stay with mathematics, where everything makes perfect sense? Maya was quiet for a long moment. Because mathematics didn't save me when I was drowning. Music did. But I don't understand why. I can't calculate why certain songs made me cry when I was at my lowest. I can't explain in numbers why playing piano made me feel human again, when everything else made me feel like a broken computer. And that terrifies me. Elena felt something shift in her understanding. Maya wasn't trying to reduce music to mathematics because she didn't value emotion. She was trying to understand something that had touched her in ways her brilliant mind couldn't explain. She was trying to map the unmappable, to find logic in feeling. What if, Elena said carefully, we approach this differently? What if instead of trying to make you less analytical, we used your mathematical understanding as a starting point? What if we figured out together where the math ends and something else begins? What do you mean? Maya asked. I mean, you can already explain what makes music work technically. You understand the theory better than most of my graduate students. So let's stop focusing on that. Let's focus on the part that scares you, the part you can't calculate, the human part. Maya looked uncertain, but also hopeful in a way Elena hadn't seen before. I don't know if I can do that, Maya admitted. Neither do I, Elena said honestly. But I'd like to try, if you're willing. Maya picked up her calculator, turned it over in her hands, then set it down on the desk. It was a small gesture, but it felt significant. "Okay," she said, "let's try." The next 6 weeks should have been a breakthrough. Elena had high hopes after her conversation with Maya. She'd developed a new teaching plan, one that would meet Maya where she was instead of trying to change her. She thought she'd finally figured it out. She was wrong. Maya continued to excel in every technical aspect of the class. She could sight-read pieces that made other students struggle for weeks. She could identify intervals by ear with perfect accuracy. She could analyze any composition and explain exactly why it worked from a mathematical perspective. On paper, she was the best student Elena had ever taught. But when Maya sat down at the piano to actually play, something was missing. It started with the weekly performance exercises. Each student had to play a short piece in front of the class. Nothing formal, just practice for building confidence and stage presence. When Maya's turn came, she chose a Bach prelude. Technically, it should have been simple for someone with her skills. She played every note perfectly. Not a single mistake. The tempo was exact, following the metronome marking precisely. Her finger placement was textbook correct. If you were grading on accuracy alone, she would have gotten a perfect score. But the room felt cold while she played. The other students shifted in their seats, checking their phones, staring out the window. One girl in the front row actually yawned. When Maya finished, there was polite applause. The kind of applause you give because it's expected, not because you were moved by what you heard. Maya sat down quickly, her face flushed, and Elena could see she knew something was wrong. After class, Elena tried to explain. "Maya, you played that piece flawlessly. But music isn't just about playing the right notes at the right time. It's about communicating something, telling a story, making people feel something." "I don't understand," Maya said, frustration creeping into her voice. "I played it exactly as Bach wrote it. Every dynamic marking, every articulation, everything was correct. What more am I supposed to do?" "You're supposed to make it yours," Elena said. But even as the words left her mouth, she knew they were too vague. Too abstract for someone who thought in concrete terms. The problem got worse as midterms approached. Elena assigned each student a major piece to perform for their midterm evaluation. The other faculty members would be there to observe. It was a big deal, worth 40% of the semester grade. Maya chose Beethoven's Moonlight Sonata third movement. It was an ambitious choice, technically demanding and emotionally intense. Elena worried it was too much, but Maya insisted. "The mathematical patterns in this piece are fascinating," she'd said. "The way Beethoven uses the chromatic scale to create tension, the frequency modulation in the arpeggios, it's brilliant." Elena had stopped trying to tell her that wasn't the point. The week before midterms, Elena noticed Maya spending every spare moment in the practice rooms. She'd arrive early in the morning and stay late into the evening. Through the small window in the practice room door, Elena would see her playing the same passages over and over, her face intense with concentration, her calculator always within reach on the piano bench. Other students practiced hard too, but there was something almost desperate about the way Maya practiced, like she was trying to solve an equation that didn't have a solution. The night before the midterm performances, Elena couldn't sleep. She kept thinking about Maya, about the conversation they'd had 6 weeks ago. She'd promised to help Maya find the human element in music, to bridge the gap between calculation and emotion, but she'd failed. She'd tried explaining it in different ways, had given Maya exercises in dynamics and phrasing, had played examples and talked about interpretation. Nothing had worked. Maybe some things couldn't be taught. Maybe you either felt music or you didn't. The thought made Elena sad in a way she couldn't quite explain. Midterm day arrived cold and gray, with rain pattering against the windows of the recital hall. The faculty members filed in, taking seats in the front rows. Elena sat with them, her stomach in knots. There were 10 students performing. Maya was scheduled 7th. The first 6 performances were a mixed bag. Some students did well, others made mistakes but recovered. There was genuine emotion in most of their playing, even when the technique wasn't perfect. The faculty members took notes, whispered to each other occasionally, nodded approvingly or frowned when appropriate. Then Maya walked onto the stage. She looked so small up there, dwarfed by the grand piano. She wore a simple black dress that her mother had probably bought for the occasion. Her hands were shaking as she sat on the bench and adjusted her position. She took a deep breath, placed her fingers on the keys, and began to play. The opening notes of the third movement rang out, fast and furious. Maya's fingers flew across the keys with mechanical precision. Every note was crystal clear, every run perfectly executed. The tempo never wavered. The dynamics followed Beethoven's markings exactly. It was technically flawless, it was also completely lifeless. Elena watched the other faculty members. Professor Whitmore, who taught voice, had a polite but blank expression. Dr. Kim, the orchestra conductor, was checking his watch. Dean Sullivan, who'd been teaching at the academy for 30 years, had his eyes closed, but Elena could tell he wasn't lost in the music. He was just tired. The piece went on for nearly 7 minutes. Maya never made a single mistake. She navigated the most difficult passages with ease, her fingers moving like a perfectly programmed machine. But there was no passion, no anger, no joy, no sadness. It was like listening to a computer play Beethoven. When the final chord rang out, there was a moment of silence. Then the faculty applauded. It was polite, professional, the kind of applause that said, "Good job, but not wow." Some of the other students clapped too, probably relieved their own performances were over. Maya stood, bowed quickly, and practically ran off the stage. Elena found her afterward in one of the practice rooms, sitting on the floor with her back against the wall, crying. Her calculator was on the floor beside her, and her carefully prepared sheet music was scattered around her. "I did everything right," Maya said when she saw Elena. Her voice was thick with tears. Every single note was correct. The timing was perfect. I followed every marking, every instruction. I practiced for hours every day. I did everything you're supposed to do, but it wasn't enough, was it? It still wasn't enough. Elena sat down on the floor next to her, not caring that her nice concert clothes were getting dusty. Maya interrupted. "Don't tell me it was fine. Don't tell me I did well." I saw their faces. I saw how bored everyone looked. And the worst part is, I don't know how to fix it. I can learn harder pieces. I can practice more. I can analyze the music more deeply. But I can't just suddenly start feeling things I don't feel. I can't manufacture emotion that isn't there. Is it really not there? Elena asked quietly. Or are you just afraid to let it out? Maya looked at her with red, swollen eyes. What's the difference? Elena didn't have an answer for that. The faculty evaluation came back 3 days later. Maya received a B-. For someone who played every note perfectly, it was a devastating grade. The comments were diplomatic but clear. Excellent technical skill. Lacks emotional depth and interpretive insight. Needs to work on musical expression and audience engagement. Maya showed Elena the evaluation with trembling hands. I'm failing, she said. Not just this class. I'm failing at this whole thing. I thought music was supposed to be different from MIT. I thought it would be easier, less pressure, but I can't do this either. I can't make people feel something. I barely know how to feel things myself anymore. That's not true, Elena protested, isn't it? Maya shot back. After MIT, after the breakdown, it's like something broke inside me. I spent so many years training my brain to analyze, to calculate, to think logically. I shut down the emotional parts because emotions were a weakness, a distraction from the work. And now I can't turn them back on. I don't even know if they're still there. She picked up her calculator, holding it like a security blanket. This makes sense to me. Numbers, patterns, logic. But standing on that stage trying to make people care about what I'm playing, I might as well be trying to speak a language I've never learned. I don't know the words. I don't know the grammar. I don't even know what I'm trying to say. Elena felt a wave of frustration wash over her. Not at Maya, but at herself. She'd been so focused on trying to teach Maya to feel the music that she'd forgotten something important. Something from her own past, her own failures as a performer. Maya, Elena said slowly, I need to tell you something. Something I don't usually share with students. Maya looked at her, waiting. I was like you once. Not in the same way, but similar. I was so focused on playing everything perfectly, on following every rule, on never making a mistake, that I forgot why I started playing music in the first place. My professors kept telling me I needed more emotion, more expression. Just like I've been telling you. And you know what happened? What? Maya whispered. I quit performing. I couldn't figure out how to be perfect and emotional at the same time. So I became a teacher instead. I convinced myself it was what I wanted, but really, I was just hiding. I was afraid that if I couldn't be the best, I shouldn't try at all. Elena took a deep breath. And I've been teaching you the same way I was taught, telling you what's missing without showing you how to find it. I'm sorry for that. So what do I do? Maya asked. How do I learn something you couldn't learn yourself? It was a fair question. And finally, Elena had an answer. Elena looked at Maya sitting on that dusty practice room floor and made a decision. She was done teaching the traditional way, done with lectures about feeling and expression that clearly weren't working. If Maya's brain worked differently, then she needed to be taught differently. Starting tomorrow, you're not practicing piano, Elena said. Maya's eyes widened. What, but the semester isn't over. I have a final performance in 6 weeks, I know. But practicing more isn't going to help you. You don't need more technical skill. You need something else entirely. Elena stood up and brushed off her clothes. Tomorrow afternoon, 3 o'clock. Meet me in the parking lot, and don't bring your calculator. The next day, Maya showed up looking confused and a little worried. Elena was waiting by her old Honda, keys in hand. Get in, Elena said. We're taking a field trip. Where are we going? You'll see. They drove for 20 minutes into the city, Maya fidgeting nervously the whole way. Elena finally pulled up outside a small club with a faded sign that read, Blue Moon Jazz Lounge. A jazz club? Maya said, wrinkling her nose. But jazz doesn't follow proper musical structure. It's all improvisation and rule-breaking. Exactly, Elena said with a smile. That's why we're here. Inside, the club was dim and smoky, with mismatched chairs and tables that had seen better days. A trio was setting up on the small stage, piano, bass, and drums. It was barely 5 in the afternoon, so the place was mostly empty except for a few regulars nursing drinks at the bar. Elena led Maya to a table near the front. The pianist, an older man with gray dreadlocks and weathered hands, spotted Elena and grinned. Elena Martinez. Haven't seen you in months. You finally coming back to play with us? Not today, Leo. But I brought someone who needs to hear what you do. The trio started playing and Maya immediately tensed up. Elena could practically see her brain trying to analyze what she was hearing, trying to find the patterns and structures. But jazz didn't work that way. The musicians were having a conversation, trading phrases, responding to each other in real time. Sometimes they followed a rhythm. Sometimes they abandoned it completely. Sometimes they played notes that were mathematically wrong, but somehow sounded right. Maya leaned over and whispered urgently, They keep making mistakes. The pianist just played a chord that creates harmonic dissonance, and the drummer isn't following the time signature consistently. Those aren't mistakes, Elena whispered back. That's the point. They're creating something new in the moment. They're taking risks. They're letting themselves be messy and imperfect and human. As the set continued, something strange happened. Maya stopped trying to analyze. Maybe her brain just gave up trying to make sense of the mathematical chaos. But she started listening differently. Elena saw her foot tapping unconsciously, saw her lean forward, actually engaged instead of confused. When the trio finished their set, Leo came over to their table. Elena introduced Maya and explained what they were working on, though she kept it vague. Leo nodded thoughtfully. You know what your problem is, he said to Maya. You're trying to play music like you're following a recipe. But music isn't a recipe. It's more like cooking by feel. You taste as you go. You adjust. You trust your instincts. I don't have instincts for music, Maya said quietly. Sure you do. You just haven't learned to listen to them yet. Leo gestured to his piano. Come here. Play me something, anything. Maya looked at Elena, panicked. I can't improvise. Then don't improvise. Just play a scale, C major. Simple as it gets. Reluctantly, Maya sat at Leo's worn piano and played a C major scale. Up and down. Perfectly even, perfectly accurate. Now play it again, Leo said. But this time make one note longer than the others. Doesn't matter which one. Just pick one and hold it. Maya played the scale again, holding the 5th note slightly longer. It sounded strange, deliberate. Again, Leo said. But this time make one note quieter. Your choice. They continued like this for 15 minutes. Each time, Leo gave Maya permission to break one small rule. Play one note out of rhythm. Add one unexpected pause. Make one note louder than it should be. At first, Maya's face showed pure discomfort. But slowly, something shifted. She started making choices that weren't mathematically optimal but were interesting. That's it, Leo said, grinning. You're starting to taste the food instead of just following the recipe. Over the next 2 weeks, Elena gave Maya assignments that had nothing to do with piano practice. She sent her to a children's music therapy session at the local hospital, where kids with special needs used music to express themselves. Maya came back shaken. There was a boy there, Maya told Elena. Maybe 6 years old, nonverbal autism. He couldn't talk, couldn't communicate normally. But when the therapist gave him a xylophone, he played these patterns. Not sophisticated patterns, not even in key most of the time. But his whole face lit up. He was so happy. And his mother started crying because she said it was the first time she'd seen him really connect with something in months. What did that make you feel? Elena asked. Maya was quiet for a long moment. It made me realize music doesn't have to be perfect to matter. That boy wasn't playing correctly, but he was playing honestly, and that was enough. The next assignment was harder. Elena sent Maya to play piano at a nursing home. Not a performance, just background music during dinner hour at the memory care unit. Residents with dementia and Alzheimer's, many of them barely aware of their surroundings. Maya played her usual repertoire. Bach, Mozart, Beethoven, all technically perfect. But then something unexpected happened. An elderly woman named Dorothy, who usually sat silent and unresponsive, suddenly started humming along. Her hands began moving like she was playing an invisible piano. A nurse came over, tears in her eyes. That's the first sound she's made in 3 weeks, the nurse whispered. She used to be a piano teacher before the Alzheimer's. We thought we'd lost her completely. Maya stopped playing, overwhelmed. Dorothy stopped humming and returned to her silent state. The nurse squeezed Maya's shoulder. Keep playing, please. Even if she can't show it, I think she's in there somewhere listening. Maya started playing again, but this time something was different. She wasn't thinking about the notes being correct. She was thinking about Dorothy, about reaching through the fog of disease to touch whatever part of her was still there. She played simpler melodies, old standards that someone Dorothy's age might remember. Moon River. What a Wonderful World. Songs that were mathematically basic but emotionally powerful. Dorothy didn't hum again that day, but she stayed awake the whole time Maya played. That was enough. When Maya met with Elena the next day, she looked exhausted but different somehow. Less guarded. I think I'm starting to understand, Maya said. Music isn't about the notes being right. It's about connection. It's about reaching people, even if they can't reach back. Yes, Elena said, but there's still one more thing you need to do. And it's going to be the hardest one. What is it? Elena pulled out a blank sheet of manuscript paper. You need to compose something. Not analyze someone else's work. Not play someone else's notes perfectly. Create something of your own. Maya looked at the blank paper like it was a test she was destined to fail. I don't know how to compose. Yes, you do. You understand music theory better than anyone. You know what makes pieces work structurally. But here's the challenge. I want you to compose something that's intentionally imperfect. I want you to break the rules on purpose. Write music that has mistakes in it, but make those mistakes beautiful. That doesn't make sense, Maya protested. I know. That's the point. Elena leaned forward. You've spent your whole life trying to be perfect. At MIT, you pushed yourself until you broke. Now you're doing the same thing with music. But what if perfection isn't the goal? What if the goal is to be honest, to be real, to be human? And humans are messy and imperfect, and we make mistakes constantly. Maya stared at the blank manuscript paper. What if I can't do it? Then you can't, but I don't believe that. I think you're so much more than the sum of your calculations. I think there's emotion and creativity and humanity in you that you've been afraid to let out, because it doesn't fit into neat mathematical equations. Elena pulled out another assignment sheet. You have 4 weeks until your final performance. Here's what I want you to do. Create a piece that tells your story, not the story of a perfect math genius who played perfect notes, the story of a person who broke, who struggled, who's trying to find her way back. Use your mathematical understanding as the foundation, but let yourself get messy on top of it. Let yourself make mistakes. Let yourself feel things even if they don't make logical sense. And what if it's terrible? Maya asked, her voice small. Then it'll be terrible. But it'll be yours. And that's worth more than 1,000 perfect performances of someone else's work. Maya took the manuscript paper with shaking hands. She looked at it for a long time, then looked back at Elena. I'm scared, she admitted. Good, Elena said. That means you're about to do something real. That night, Maya sat in her small dorm room with the blank manuscript paper in front of her. She picked up her pencil a dozen times and put it down again. She pulled out her calculator, stared at it, then shoved it in a drawer. Finally, she closed her eyes and thought about everything that had happened: the breakdown at MIT, the months of therapy, the slow, painful process of learning to exist again, the moment she first heard music and felt something crack open inside her chest, the children at the hospital, Dorothy at the nursing home, the jazz musicians creating beauty out of chaos, and slowly, hesitantly, she began to write. The 4 weeks before the final performance passed in a blur. Maya stopped coming to Elena's office with questions about technique. She stopped asking about proper chord progressions and harmonic theory. Instead, she disappeared into the practice rooms for hours at a time, and Elena respected her privacy. This had to be Maya's journey, not hers. But Elena worried. She'd see Maya in the hallway sometimes, looking exhausted and frustrated. Once, she passed by a practice room and heard Maya playing the same phrase over and over, followed by the sound of her fist hitting the piano keys in frustration. Elena almost went in but stopped herself. Maya needed to struggle through this on her own. 2 days before the final performance, Maya finally showed up at Elena's office. She looked like she hadn't slept in days. Dark circles under her eyes, her hair pulled back in a messy ponytail, wearing the same hoodie she'd worn the first day of class. "I finished it," Maya said, holding out several pages of manuscript paper. Her handwriting was messy, with crossed-out sections and notes scribbled in the margins. It looked nothing like her usual neat, precise work. Elena took the pages and studied them. The piece was titled Proof of Emotion, a Mathematical Rebellion. Just reading through it, Elena could see what Maya had done. The composition started with rigid mathematical patterns, perfect ratios, everything following the rules. But gradually, the structure began to break down. Notes appeared that shouldn't be there mathematically. Rhythms became irregular. The final section abandoned traditional structure almost entirely. "Play it for me," Elena said quietly. Maya sat at the piano in Elena's office, a small upright that had seen better days. She placed her hands on the keys and took a deep breath. Then she began to play. The opening was exactly what Elena expected. Mechanical, precise, cold. It sounded like every other piece Maya had played all semester. But then slowly something changed. The notes started to waver. Not because Maya was making mistakes, but because she was making choices. A pause here that wasn't written. A note held longer there because it felt right. The rhythm started to breathe instead of marching forward like a metronome. And then came the middle section, and Elena felt tears prick her eyes. The music became chaotic, dissonant, painful. It sounded like breaking, like something shattering into pieces. Elena could hear Maya's breakdown at MIT in those notes, could hear the panic and fear and overwhelming pressure. But then quietly, almost hesitantly, a melody emerged from the chaos. Simple, uncertain, but undeniably there. The melody grew stronger, more confident, but it never became perfect. It kept those rough edges, those imperfections. It was the sound of someone learning to exist again, learning to be human instead of a machine. The final section was the most remarkable. Maya's mathematical patterns returned, but they were different now. They coexisted with the emotional elements instead of fighting them. Structure and chaos, logic and feeling, working together instead of at war. When the last note faded, Maya kept her hands on the keys for a long moment. Then she turned to look at Elena, and there were tears running down her face. "I don't know if it's good," Maya said, her voice cracking. "I broke so many rules. Some of those chord progressions don't make mathematical sense. There are sections where the timing is all wrong on purpose. But it's honest. It's how I feel, or how I felt while writing it. I'm still not sure I understand the difference." Elena wiped her own eyes. "Maya, that was beautiful. That was real. That was everything I hoped you could find. But what if everyone else hates it?" Maya asked. "What if the faculty thinks it's just noise? What if people laugh?" "Then they laugh," Elena said firmly. "But you'll know you created something true, and that matters more than any grade or any applause." The night of the final performance arrived. The recital hall was packed with students, faculty, and parents. Maya's parents had driven up from Boston, sitting nervously in the third row. Her mother kept twisting a tissue in her hands. Elena sat with the other faculty members again, but this time she felt different. She wasn't worried about Maya's technical skills. She was just hoping that Maya could be brave enough to show everyone what she'd shown Elena in that office. Maya was scheduled last, Elena wondered if she'd requested that or if it was just random chance. Either way, it meant sitting through 9 other performances first, each one ratcheting up Maya's anxiety. Finally, it was time. The department chair announced Maya's name and the title of her piece. There were a few confused murmurs at the word rebellion in what was supposed to be a classical music performance. Maya walked onto the stage. She wore the same black dress from the midterm performance, but she carried herself differently, less like someone walking to her execution and more like someone who had made peace with whatever was about to happen. She sat at the piano and adjusted the bench. Her hands were shaking, but she didn't try to hide it. She looked out at the audience, found Elena's face, and gave the tiniest nod. Then she began to play. The opening section sounded like vintage Maya, perfect, precise, mathematical. Elena saw some of the faculty members nodding approvingly, but she also saw confusion on their faces. Why did this piece sound so cold? Had Maya learned nothing all semester? But then the music started to shift. The rigid patterns began to loosen. Maya added a pause that wasn't in the written music. She played one section softer than indicated, making it sound vulnerable instead of powerful. And Elena saw the exact moment when the audience started to really listen. The middle section hit like a wave. The chaos, the dissonance, the sound of something breaking. Maya's fingers flew across the keys, playing notes that clashed and collided. Some people in the audience shifted uncomfortably. This wasn't pretty music. This wasn't safe. But it was honest. Maya's mother was crying. Elena could see her shoulders shaking even from across the room. Her father had his arm around her, his own eyes wet. They knew what this music meant. They'd lived through their daughter's breakdown, had watched her struggle to put herself back together. Then came the quiet melody, emerging from the wreckage, the sound of hope, tentative and fragile. The audience went completely still. Even the students who'd been checking their phones put them away. Something real was happening on that stage. Maya played the final section with her eyes closed. The marriage of structure and emotion, logic and feeling. Her mathematical patterns were still there. You could hear them if you listened carefully. But they were wrapped in something human now, something imperfect and alive. When she played the final chord, she held it longer than written, letting it ring out until it naturally faded into silence. Then she opened her eyes. For a moment, nobody moved. The silence stretched out, and Elena saw panic flash across Maya's face. But then someone started clapping. It was Leo, the jazz pianist, standing in the back row where he'd snuck in to watch. Then Maya's parents stood, applauding. Then Elena stood. Then the whole audience was on their feet. It wasn't polite applause this time. It was real. People weren't clapping because they were supposed to. They were clapping because they'd been moved. Because they'd witnessed something genuine. Maya stood and bowed, tears streaming down her face openly now. She didn't try to hide them or wipe them away. She just let herself feel everything. Backstage afterward, Elena found Maya surrounded by people, her parents hugging her, other students congratulating her. Even Professor Whitmore, who'd looked so bored during the midterm performance, was telling her how powerful her piece had been. When the crowd finally cleared, Maya pulled Elena aside. "I got an email this morning," Maya said, "from MIT, my old advisor. He said if I ever wanted to come back, they'd welcome me." Elena's heart sank. Of course MIT wanted her back. Maya was brilliant. "Are you going to go?" Elena asked, trying to keep her voice neutral. "Yes," Maya said, and Elena felt the disappointment wash over her. "But not the way I left. I'm not going back to pure mathematics. I'm changing my focus to computational music theory, the intersection between mathematics and music, studying how emotion and pattern work together, how the human brain processes both logic and feeling simultaneously." Elena blinked. "Wait, what?" "You showed me I don't have to choose," Maya said, smiling through her tears. "I don't have to be just the math genius or just the musician. I can be both. I can use my mathematical mind to understand music in new ways. Maybe I can help build bridges between the two fields. Maybe I can help other people like me who see the world in patterns but want to feel it too." That's incredible, Maya, Elena said, and she meant it. I wouldn't have figured it out without you, Maya said. You didn't try to fix me. You just helped me find a way to be myself, imperfections and all. They stood there for a moment, teacher and student, both of them changed by what they'd learned from each other. Can I tell you something? Elena asked. I'm going to start performing again. After watching you be so brave tonight, I realized I've been hiding for years, using teaching as an excuse not to take risks. You inspired me. Maya's eyes widened. Really? Really? Maybe we're both proof that it's never too late to find your voice, even if it's messy and imperfect and doesn't sound like anyone else's. 6 months later, Elena received a package in the mail. Inside was a published research paper from MIT's music theory department. The author was Maya Chen. The title was Harmonic Imperfection, a mathematical analysis of emotional resonance in musical performance. There was a note attached in Maya's handwriting. Thank you for teaching me that the most beautiful music happens where the math ends and the humanity begins. Also, I got an A+ on this paper, and my advisor said it was the most creative work he'd seen in years. Turns out breaking the rules is actually pretty good for academia too. Who knew? Elena smiled and pinned the note to her bulletin board, right next to the recital program from that final performance. She looked at it every day before class, reminding herself that the best teaching isn't about making students fit into boxes. It's about helping them become more fully themselves, equations and emotions and all.